Hey everybody, Dr. Snellgrove here, just recording a brief video for our continued readings in the good old essentials of technical communication. Y'all seem like a pretty chill crew because I was reviewing the syllabus. So I was like, why did I make him read that much? That seems really cruel. I was like, oh, most of this is just examples. Most of this is just what you should and should not do. Visual examples, which I thought would be helpful as you were working on your PowerPoints. And so the earlier part of this, we've got starting on page 87, designing effective pages and screens. So this had some stuff that some of you, maybe if you're veteran, PowerPoint designers or veteran, writers, tech writers, you might be like, no, duh. But stuff like, use a legible type design. Like, can we read what you're doing? And that seems like a no duh. I was reading an article recently that I'm pretty sure AI generated it, which is why it was so bad. But like all of a sudden, the one word was in like a complete italicized and in a completely different font. I was looking at it like, kill, Bill. What the hell does that even say? So legible type. Same thing with spacing lines of text for easy reading. It's one of the primary reasons, by the way, most of your college essays are double spaced, so it's easy to read. Adjusting line length to page or screen size, which is just, we're going to look at some more specific stuff, but that's just a way of saying like, hey, you've got so much text and you've got so much screen, and you should kind of match them as best you can. We don't want to have like super close together lines and then you've got all this blank space that you don't necessarily want, need. So you want it to be nice and legible. Again, especially for presentations, because people are reading this while you're giving. And then of course, position words and illustrations in a complementary relationship, which is just a way of saying, hey, you don't want your, your words to get in the way of your pictures. You don't want your pictures to get in the way of your words. Anything else. And so I don't want to, and obviously this is not designed just for presentations. I just included it in the designing documents. Like, that's what you're doing. But they have some other stuff in here that might or might not surprise you. For instance, use headings frequently. And so if you're mostly used to academic writing, there's not a lot of headers in academic writing, but you'll notice almost immediately reading online articles like, oh yeah, there's headers all over the place. Headers are reader friendly because they make it easy for people to scan through. And that's another important thing, obviously, for your own, presentations. I just mentioned how like you'll be speaking, there's something behind you. Is it easy for people to scan through and read? Same deal here with use bulleted list for 3 or more parallel points. Bulleted lists are a big no-no in like academic essays. I'm always telling my comp students, like, please don't do that. But the minute you get to tech writing, online writing, design documents, stuff like this, yes, bullets are great. Bullet points, it's visual. Like, instead of making somebody read long paragraphs of info, you're giving them like 3 or more key points and 3 or more bullet points. Donezo. All right. And they have a thing here. In digital documents, make your paragraphs even shorter than you would in paper documents to allow obvious space on the small screens of mobile devices. So that's actually pretty important. I've done research on this lots. The majority of people now use the internet using their mobile devices. And it's one of the reasons that if you read articles online, they tend to be about 2 to 3 sentences per paragraph. And again, that can be a big change if you are primarily used to, you have to have 5 or more sentences in a formal academic essay. Online writing is very different. All right. But yeah, a lot of this, I don't want to give it shortchange. Most of what is, I think, useful in here is the visual examples, because they have lots of stuff here like, hey, look at this, professional, letter that was written. Hey, look at this safety alert that was written. Look at this really long looking email over here. And, all of these are just practical, like different kinds of documents you might be designing and different ways of applying the skills in this section. And they have some fairly common sense stuff in here that I consider common sense. Like, for instance, the idea, make the headings parallel Use the same grammatical structure for wording and phrasing. So basically, if you never had a teacher drill parallelism stuff into you, it's like someone asks you what your hobbies are. It's like, I enjoy running, jogging, and to play tennis. So play, you were just doing everything ending in ing. So parallelism is when you have everything matching. So that should be going on in your headers as well. You want that kind of visual consistency as people are reading through. And of course, make sure the headings match. If you have like a table of contents, you don't want somebody like, wait, where's the thing that was in the table? Oh, I forgot to include that. Make sure that is in there. All right, so this design distinctive headings. They don't get a lot into this, and it's definitely, easier said than done, I think. But they have stuff in here about like, all right, you want to strike a balance. I like to think of it as a balance between a header that gets our attention, something that might be kind of interesting, kind of mysterious, something like that, along with something that is maybe more of a, like practical, all right, I'm scanning through what exactly, does this do? You don't want somebody to look at your header like, what the heck are they even talking about? There is such a thing as being too mysterious. All right, so 108 through, switching now to designing illustrations, which starts on 108. I hope y'all saw right away. I didn't realize, is this man expecting me to draw? This isn't an art class, but this is more about creating the kinds of illustrations that are, that you would put into a presentation or into a document, things like tables, graphs, and stuff like that. And just like what the best practices are. So for instance, if you look at 110 and then the example on 111, they talk about, I'm putting tables into my document. Tables are a great way of presenting complex information in a visual way. But they talk about the importance of labeling everything. Like, all right, do we have a heading above every column where we know what this information is? Do we know what the units of measurement are? Do we know where they're talking about like thousands or millions when you throw out numbers like 6290? Like, okay, is that just 6,000? Or are you doing something weird with that? So just making it as it says, if possible, box your table to separate it from surrounding paragraphs. Again, the relationship between visual imagery and text, you want the stuff to stand out. In fact, in a presentation, things like tables are usually just their own slides, so you don't have anything else that is distracting from it. All right, keeping tables as simple as possible, include only data relevant to your purpose. This is mostly a warning if there's any of you out there that like you get really into it. It's like, there's so much information. I want to share everything with my reader. And it's like, well, everything is a lot. And so, maybe you can create different tables and put those in at different parts of your document, different parts of your presentation, but please don't do information overload. In fact, I would argue that is the main thing to avoid in a PowerPoint presentation, is information overload. It's one of the reasons why there's usually just a handful of things on each screen instead of cramming in as much information as you can. Like it makes it look less cluttered, yes, but it's also like, hey, there is only so much that your reader can focus on. 3, 4, 5 bullet points, okay. A bullet point and a table and 5 images, and it's like, oh my God, there's too much going on here for us. All right, on page 114, they talk about using bar and column graphs. Some of this is, info that carries over, advice that carries over from before, like to avoid putting excessive information in there. You obviously got to make sure your axes are labeled, like what is the point of this kind of information if we don't know what the heck the x-axis and y-axis are even talking about. Some of this, if you've done this before, some of you are probably like, yeah, no duh, but start the x-axis at 0, equally space the intervals to avoid distorting the length of the bars. So that's the idea, that like some of this is just accurately presenting your information, but some of this is also just making sure visually the information looks good, when you're presenting it. Using color carefully. Color can improve the clarity of a graph, but excessive color can reduce comprehension and distort information. So you look at the example there, it's not a coincidence that it's black text, it's red bars. Very simple to keep track of. Imagine if it was like every other bar was like blue or green. You're like, wait, what are those? Are those different? No, am I supposed to know something about the blue and the green? So you want to keep it nice and simple. Put labels on or near the bars or columns, and so what it's saying there, you might be thinking, I could just cram that info into the corner like here, like you would in a map. Here's an explanation of what these things mean. But it's like, no, people that are looking at this, they need to immediately make a connection between what they're seeing and what it means. So you need to label it. All right. Make sure the graph is clear and correct. Two very important things. Is it legible? Is it accurate? All right. So there's other stuff there. I don't want to go over every single minute. But again, there's lots of these examples. I hope these are helpful to you, different kinds of graphs that you might include. They have some information on 119 going in, and then the example on 120 about circle graphs, or I like that they point out, this is what I've always called it, a pie chart. I'm a big boy. I call pies pies. All right, so again, you'll notice that there's a lot of carryover, like the advice of doing one kind of visual thing carries over to the next. Reduce the number of segments, in a circle graph to like 7 or fewer. More will create confusion about their relative sizes. So some of this is just like, again, avoiding info overload for the reader. Clearly label all the segments, whether it's inside or outside. We need to know horizontal labels so we can easily read them. Begin with the largest section in the upper right-hand quadrant. Arrange the remaining segments clockwise. So basically, I don't think I'm exactly blowing your minds here, but we look at pie charts. Humans look at pie charts the way we read clocks. So we start, kind of at noon, and we make our way around. So hence the largest section in the upper right-hand quadrant. It's the first thing we're going to look at, usually the most important thing in the pie chart. All right. They've got some stuff here for line graphs starting on page 121. And again, I feel repetitive. I mean, a lot of this is label your axis or axes, choose the scale of each axis to show the appropriate steepness of the slope. So it's like, are we starting, normally at 0 and spacing things out, but you want to show how much things have risen or fallen. You want to make that clear. Choosing spacing so the slope of the line accurately and appropriately measures the actual trend. They point out, obviously, there's lots of software that does this. You don't have to suddenly become like designers or anything. But a lot of this is just making sure like you can tweak certain settings where, again, we keep coming back to, is this accurate and does it look good? Avoid using more than 3 data lines in one graph unless they are separated by visible space. Again, just making sure it looks clean and clear. All right. I feel like I'm zooming through here, but I mean, so much of this is just pictures. Organization charts. Now, this may or may not be part of your PowerPoint presentation, but the longer you work at institutions, you'll encounter org charts like this. And so, it's pretty simplistic. You can see there right on the example, I think. But the idea, here's the person at the top, the director, the CEO, whoever we're talking about, and then who reports to that person? Okay, well, are there any sub things like, all right, this person's over this division? Or you could really, subdivide this. Who are the people that report to each person? Who are the people that report to them? But as it puts here, you want to make the chart nice and simple, easy to read. Same shape, size, and color for different divisions. You'll notice there's green here for certain things. There's orange, so at a glance, you know what it's talking about. Label everything clearly. Connect each level of organization to higher and lower levels with a clear line and not arrows. If you want to use arrows, you do flow charts. So we got that over here on page 127. It's just talking about the flow chart needs to be nice and simple, where it's like, all right, we start here, it goes, just one arrow leading to another. You want your stuff to be clearly labeled. You want the explanations to be clear and concise. And basically, the whole point of this is it's easier to read it this way than to read a whole long paragraph about it. All right. I feel like so much of this is repetitive. They do have some stuff for diagrams, where it's like, this is on page 130. Diagrams identify the parts of the subject. Keep the diagram simple, label each of the pertinent parts. I mean, there's not much to a diagram. Photographs, you might choose, I think this is, it's the last section of the assigned reading, please. Photographs. So you get the photographs, what are you doing? Keep photographs nice and simple. Don't edit or polish, carelessly. You want to make stuff accurate. You don't want to misrepresent what they are looking at. It says, if appropriate or necessary for viewers' understanding, apply labels for each of the pertinent parts of the subject. yada, yada. And then the main thing, you can see the example on page 133, is, labeling it. So if you ever did say like an yeah, I would say if you did that kind of thing in your comp essays or some other work, it's like, here's a picture, I'm giving it a label, figure 1, figure 2, figure 3, and then I'm giving a description of what I'm looking at. And so how much description that you give depends largely on how much room you have on the paper, and also, of course, the medium, I guess you could say. Like, it's one thing to be in a physical document. I've got, all right, a really dense description of what this is. But if it's a presentation, that should be a short and sweet description, because if you were going to make them read a whole lot, why are you showing them a picture in the first place? All right, that's it for me. Actually, I have to go get to class. I hope this has been helpful. Y'all know the deal. If you have any questions about anything, feel free to email me. Feel free to text me, 863-835-2399. Y'all have a good one.